Welcome to the Trending Tokens podcast with Jake Vale and Jeff Pulver. Our guest today is Jacob Nir David, co-founder and chairman of Jezreel Valley Winery and CEO and co-founder of Vincent, a Medici Ventures portfolio company, which is a marketplace that connects wineries with wine lovers. We will discuss Vino Ventures, which is a planned tokenized wine fund, coronavirus's impact on wine futures and wine sales, and the future of tokenized wine. All opinions on Trending Tokens are the opinions of Jake, Jeff, and the guests. Nothing should be taken as legal, trading, or investment advice. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. We hope you enjoy.
Hi, it's Jeff Pulver, together with Jake Vale, and welcome to Trending Tokens. Today's special guest is a dear close friend of mine, Jacob Nir David, who's the founder, CEO of a very interesting company, a company which tastes really good. And my background with Jacob goes back 25 plus years. Jacob tried to save my life, if you will, by rescuing me when I was working on Wall Street to focus on my passion of voice over IP. And while I didn't take up that opportunity, I'm grateful for all the times I've had with Jacob over the years to be disruptive in various platforms on the internet, from helping to change the way the world communicates, and Jacob launching the first long-distance phone company based on the internet, which was commercially successful and amazing. And today, Jacob is taken one of his passions, which is winemaking, and brought it into the digital internet era. And welcome, Jacob. How are you?
Thank God. I'm doing good. I'm going to pour myself a glass of wine while we talk about all this. It's difficult still to do digital wine, to give you actual wine through Zoom. There are other platforms that may support that, but Zoom doesn't yet.
We don't have no digital wine yet. So
no digital wine yet. Right. There will one day be VoIP, which is wine over the internet. But
of course,
right now I'm going to have my own. So, and this is a really cool wine, by the way, which is a natural bubbly wine called Pétillant Naturel, and this is a rosé, very pretty one. So here we go. All right. This is 2019. It's the kind of wine that you drink right away. Anyway, cheers. Good to be here.
Cheers. So when I first learned about your ideas in blockchain and wine, you were doing something called VinX, which sort of sounded like MinX, what we were doing with the Minix Exchange. And then the name of the company changed to Vincent, and you were focusing on wine futures. And I understand you're also starting a fund to focus in that space.
Yeah. So VinX became Vincent. So all those who met me, either through Jeff or otherwise, is VinX. We changed the name to Vincent for kind of two important reasons. One, when people heard the name VinX, they thought it sounded too techy, and we're really about wine. Yeah, we're really about wine. We're really about wine, right? We're not Minix. We're not a trading. We're a trading platform, but it's about wine, and we wanted people to keep the wine front of center, whatever that expression is.
Yeah, focus.
Yeah,
right ahead.
Focus. And then the second issue is that there were two other companies that had names VinX this, VinX that, and they were suing each other over trademark issues. So we figured better not get involved in that. Let's do a rebrand. So almost a year ago, we did a rebrand to Vincent, Vincent. You can find us on vincent.wine, Vincent.wine. I love the .wine domain name. I bought a lot of those domains. And we thank God we were able to go from a vision statement, which I gave at a conference of Jeff's, actually, where he invited me up onto the stage, somewhat impromptu, which is usually the case with Jeff. And I gave a vision statement, and we made it come to life. And the Vincent platform basically connects wineries directly with wine lovers around the world. We have wineries participating from France, Spain, Italy, Israel, the US, Australia, and we've partnered them with wine lovers in over a dozen countries so far. Most of our wine when we started was pre-ordering wine and getting people really involved in the winemaking process, getting them involved as early as possible. We were tokenizing those wine futures or wine contracts, and you have a wallet within the Vincent app where you actually hold a token that represents that contract, that contract for future wine, and you could trade it.
Was that considered a security?
Well, it was a drinkable security, so I don't know how they resolved that one. But no, I actually met in DC with folks from the Ag Committee, who I learned actually oversee the commodities FTC, whatever that's called, the commodities regulatory arm, and they explained to me that a forward, which essentially is what we're providing a platform for, that a forward of a real physical asset is not considered a security, and is actually not, and is not regulated as a commodity. You're essentially just pre-buying something similar to what you would do on Kickstarter or Indiegogo. In this case, it's with wine.
How is that different than orange juice futures?
Yeah, I asked that question, and they said, "Do you want it to be different? Or you don't want it to be different?" No, I want it to be different. I want it to be different.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. Less regulation is always a good thing. So yeah, it's we're essentially exempt from that, and we did not yet. We've started just a hint of what will come, which is that once you have these tokens that represent these future bottles of wine, you could actually trade those tokens. The infrastructure for it exists already, and you can see a hint of it in the Vincent app, which includes a representation of your wallet, and you could move the token from your wallet to somebody else's wallet. We're not ourselves providing any kind of trading interface, so the trade will happen, but we're not getting involved in it. So the terms of that trade you would conduct off chain and
right
the
now.
idea would be that for example, if 2020 turns out to be an amazing year for wine for the vineyards in France, in a certain part of France, I could be buying those futures now, and then someone could come in and want them more than I do, and I could sell it to them at a profit, and ultimately they will receive physical delivery of that wine.
Exactly.
When it becomes available.
Exactly. So, for example, we were just granted an allocation. It's called in wine speak in Bordeaux, where you have to kind of fight for an allocation of certain wineries. It's about 300 Grand Cru wineries in the Bordeaux region. Some of the Burgundies are involved in this as well, where there's a whole system how you get an allocation. And right now, they're under a tremendous amount of pressure because they're not only facing what we're all facing, which are how do we continue to conduct business in the shadow of Corona, but they were already in the shadow of the Trump tariffs before Corona. So they got hit by 25% tariffs late last year, enacted by the Trump administration, and their number one market is the U.S. So all of a sudden, the price of their product went up by 25% in the U.S. So they were already under a lot of stress, and then along came Corona, even more stress. So you could actually get some great opportunities, which in plain speak are bargains, to buy what are still futures from the 2018 harvest and the 2019 harvest. So from the 2018 harvest, we have a whole bunch of really incredible wines at great prices, which we're going to be uploading to our platform over the next week or so, of some of the best brands known and who have shown to be great assets as well in terms of appreciation of value, but they're also simply just great wines at great prices because people are under a lot of pressure right now. So you could buy those. You could hold them for the next 10 years. I promise you will not lose money. It is a real asset, and it will continue to. Wine has shown itself over the past 20, 30 years to be the best performing alternative asset class. You will not lose money. I'm not guaranteeing you they'll come back to me, but you won't lose money based on all the historical data. And you also have a great bottle of wine. So if you want to drink it, you can go ahead and drink it.
But just to clarify, at the very beginning of the interview, you poured yourself that wine, and you said you had to drink that now. So what's the difference?
There's some wines which are not. Some wines which aren't great to hold on to long term, because wine is a living being, if you will, and every bottle is an organism. It starts off like that. It starts off like that in the barrel, and then when you get to the bottle, each bottle is a work on its own. So there are some wines that you make on purpose from a winemaking point of view for them to get better and better and better with age. Sometimes you can predict kind of where they're going to crest in terms of their best drinking window. And there are some wines which drink them now and they're going to start to decline, relatively quickly. This is one of those wines. You got to drink it now.
Good, but it tastes good right now.
It tastes incredible right now.
So with everything going on with Corona, are you able, as a winemaker, to just sit on your wine for another year or two and not do anything right now?
Right. So there's certain wines, which particularly red wines, which you can just sit on, right? Even some white wines and rosés, if you keep them in the proper conditions, you can sit on them for definitely another 6 months, perhaps even a bit longer than that. The red wines, much longer than that. But remember, this is a massive cash flow issue, right? So even a small boutique winery, which like my winery, and my winery is very indicative of the situation of thousands and thousands and thousands of boutique wineries around the world. For example, just in France, there are 10,000 wineries. So you have thousands and thousands of wineries in the same situation, where from a cash flow point of view, we don't have the deep pockets of a big corporation, and the governments which we are citizens of, whether here in Israel or in the States or even in France. There's a limit to how much support you're going to get, governmental support. So from a cash flow point of view, you've got to get your wine out the door. So what Corona has done is force a lot of people to rethink how they get wine to market. And this is where actually tokenizing wine comes back into play even more so, because supply chain in the wine world is quite convoluted, and usually by the time you get a bottle of wine in a wine store, it's several hands removed from its source, at least. It could be more than several, but several hands removed, and its price has risen. In other words, from the ex-seller price, from what the winery actually got to what you're paying in a wine store, you could be paying 3-4 times what the winery is actually getting. So there's a tremendous amount of money and value that's getting spent on this supply chain, and also very little data flow in that supply chain. So when you get that bottle of wine in a wine store, you don't really know, is this a counterfeit bottle? Did this fall off a truck? Was it stored properly? So on and so forth. When you create that direct connection with the winery, and you can get this bottle of wine and you can scan it and see, I'm validating this bottle of wine actually came directly from the winery. How we do that, I can explain. But this, and I can see on an app that this is that bottle of wine, then that's when I think you recognize the value of putting supply chains on a blockchain. And you also give people both a psychological sense of comfort, and what I call closing the loop between the winery and the wine lover, and providing a platform to allow that to happen. So, that was a long-winded way to say that in the move, in the shadow of Corona, in the mood of in the shadow of Corona, wineries have to accelerate their plans or create plans to go direct to consumer that they otherwise might not have been thinking of for a very long time.
And is there a lot of impact from the supply chain to restaurants, or is it coming through the same sort of supply chain, getting to a restaurant or getting to someone's house, since all the restaurants are shut down?
Right. So the restaurants are shut down. So there's two things that happen as a result of the restaurants being shut down. One is that the restaurants, if you remember, are scrambling for cash as well. So what do the restaurants have? They've got, kitchen equipment. They've got some napkins, some tablecloths, right? Not exactly easy things to sell in an open market. What is the one thing they have? I'm talking about like high-end restaurant, mid to high-end restaurants. What's the one thing they have to sell, which historically represented 40% of their profits anyway, is their wine. They've got some restaurants will have wine cellars or wine collections, which are thousands and thousands and thousands of bottles. So what's happening right now, exactly the same, is that a lot of restaurants are putting those wine lists up on marketplaces to try and sell them to generate cash. Once again, if you have no way of knowing, if you go to Craigslist and see, a bottle of Chateau Lafite, for $10, I can tell you it's probably not Chateau Lafite.
So do you see any conflicts with your supply, with the relationships that you may get by having consumers go direct to vineyard and bypass the sales channel? So that I may have discovered your wine in my local wine store, but I want to verify, validate that this is an authentic bottle of wine. And the moment I do that, isn't there a channel conflict? And is that something which...
So, Jeff, if you remember, many years ago when we were talking about the amount of international long distance traffic,
yes, right? I remember those calls.
Remember those days, right? And the big question was, if we really open up access, is the pie going to increase, or are we fighting over the same piece of pie? And our contention was that things were being stifled by the regulatory environment, which led to high prices. And therefore, if you opened it up, we weren't fighting over the same pie. The pie would become much bigger. And I think that, that's exactly what happened, obviously. And I think if you look at the wine industry as one of the last industries to be almost untouched by the e-commerce revolutions and evolutions of the past 20 years. So the wine industry, just to give you a statistic, in the United States, less than 5% of wine is sold online.
Really?
And, well, until 2 months ago. Until 2 months ago, less than 5% of wine was sold online. And if you go to higher end wines, the number drops precipitously. So people had a psychological block, and the system was set up to kind of force you into a very antiquated way of buying wine. But people want to drink wine, thank God. So, and when they're sitting at home for 2 months, they want to drink even more wine. So, online wine sales have shot up over the past 2 months. Just to give you an example, Wine.com, which is the best known wine e-tailer in the United States. I have a lot of constructive critique for Wine.com, but they are the biggest out there. They had March was a better month for them, I think by times 3 than December, which in their entire history, December was always their biggest month of sales, and March was either double or almost 3 times. So people are ordering wine online. It is starting to shift. Whether we will hold on to that when we emerge from all of this is the question. But from a supply chain point of view, I think people have woken up and realized, oh yeah, I can order wine and have it delivered to my house. The issues go around, obviously, from the last mile, that it costs money to deliver something, and with a bottle of wine, it's kind of heavy, it's bulky. So to deliver 1 bottle of wine to someone's house or 6 bottles of wine to someone's house costs the same thing. So, you're going to have questions of, if there's somebody who only wants to order 1 bottle of wine to drink tonight, is that market going to be the market that's we really want to see? Probably not. And that's why I think long-term, brick and mortar stores will remain, and they'll serve a different purpose. They'll service the people who want to, drink a bottle of wine tonight.
And the fund that you're working on, because we made reference to it before, there's Vincent, which is the future of wine business. What is the fund what was the inspiration for the fund you're working on, and what is its purpose?
So, as I got more and more involved in the wine world, which has been a journey from the inside of a bit more than 8 years.
What's the name of your winery? Because you're in what's the name of the winery?
So the name of the winery is Jezreel, Jezreel, Jezreel Valley Winery. And Jeff was actually at my winery before we had any wine.
Yes, I was.
Remember that?
I do.
So Jezreel Valley Winery, we were a startup winery, and many people still consider us a startup winery, even though we're already almost 9 years old, because in the wine world, you usually talk about hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. So a winery only 9 years old is still considered very much a baby. But we are the fastest growing boutique winery in Israel. And we already sell, let's say about 70% of our production outside of Israel, the bulk of that in the US, but also in the UK and France. And the only reason I bring all that up is, number one, to brag. But besides bragging, is to say that I learned from the inside the wine industry as it is today and as it has been over the past 5-10 years. And I saw how inefficient the wine industry is, and that at scale, you can make a lot of money by investing in the inefficiencies of the wine industry. And so when we started Vincent, then called Vinex, I had a plan to have a fund running in parallel to this marketplace, and that the fund would essentially be the house and would buy from the best vintages that we saw out there, and then could sell some of those vintages on the platform as well. Vincent is like 3 startups all in one. To add to it, the idea that we're going to have a fund also right from day one was just a little bit too much. So we put the fund plans on hold. At the end of 2019, I got inspired to resurrect those plans because 2 things were happening. One, we had already established the Vincent platform enough that we were seeing lots of incredible opportunities in the wine industry, in the global wine industry, but we didn't necessarily have the capital to capitalize on those. 2, T0 was finally going to be coming online. And why was that so relevant? Because I believe if you're going to start a fund in the year 2020, it should be a fund that's tokenized and that trades, and that people shouldn't have to wait 7-10 years to see distributions or realize profits from their investment. And I thought the best way of doing that, in most transparent way, is to structure the fund in a way that it could trade at your interest in the fund could trade as a digital security.
And where are you with that now? Are you still going forward with that? Are you?
Yeah, very, very, very much so. And we're only, as I said, only seeing more and more opportunities right now. So we are going to be doing some soft socialization of the fund. The website was supposed to be up today for people to leave any kind of indications of interest. I hope by the time this podcast goes live, the website will be live.
What's the name of the? What's the domain?
So the domain is vinoventures.wine. VINO. Vinoventures.wine. Yeah. Vinoventures.wine. There's not going to be much there, but there will be a place for you to put your email address for us to be in touch with you to tell you more about it. Obviously, as a fund, it's a regulated offering, so we have to be quite careful all the securities regulations and
Yeah,
so on.
this is not a solicitation for anybody to invest.
Exactly.
I was just curious what it was. That's fascinating. Wow.
Yep. And and I think if you look at some of the stuff that's been tokenized already, there's been some real estate, right? Some buildings that have been tokenized. I think though, and that's cool and that's fun, and I totally support it. But I think if you look at tokenizing a wine fund, where you have complete transparency, where you can see what we're holding, all the assets that we're holding. You could look at our net asset value, but you could also create your own, because there's a lot of market data around wine. And then we have, from within, the ability to realize profits. And the way you realize profits in a wine fund is I'm going to let you in a big secret. It's called buy low, sell high.
Sell high.
It's a big secret. Buy low, sell high. So if we're buying at a good price, right, and we're conducting business directly with wineries, and then we put these wines out for example, on the Vincent platform, so then we're not going through that whole long, convoluted supply chain distribution system. So our profits are going to be much higher as well. And by the way, people that are buying from us will know that it's a trusted product and they're getting a good deal.
Do you imagine in the future to have market makers who are going to be helping to facilitate the trading? Or do you think it's just going to be, how will that work? Do you have what's your feeling?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So as we know, if you technically are public, but you don't have any market makers, meaning you don't have anybody who's committed to buying your security at a certain price, then, liquidity is ephemeral. And if you try and sell your token or your share or whatever it is, you're going to drive down the price of the security.
Right.
So that's why I think the transparency is so important. When people can see what we're actually holding in the fund, the real value, the real assets that we're holding in the fund, these are real assets that have, again, real market value. So you could take a look on a number of tools like Wine Searcher, Wine Decider, a number of others, Livex in London, and see kind of what's the most recent market price for some of these wines. You could say, oh, wow, these are real assets. So if I see that the fund is trading below its NAV, that's a great opportunity for me.
Net asset value.
Yeah. Will there be proper market makers? I don't know. I know our fund is going to be relatively small in terms of the world of funds. Our fund's going to be relatively small at first. We have a target. I think I'm allowed to say what our target is. If I'm not, you'll strike it out. But our target is $50 million US. So it's going to be relatively small in the world of funds, but and even in the world of wine, it's not like it wouldn't be the biggest wine fund or anything.
Are you planning on having multiple vintages of your fund?
Yeah, so it's a question of how do you structure it, right? Do you structure it as a hedge fund, which just continues to take in more capital, or
do you have a vintage? You have the 2020 vintage, the 2021 vintage, and roll it.
I think it's still too early to tell. We're going to leave ourselves open to be able to go in this direction or that direction, and see where the path takes us. I believe that no matter what, if people have the ability to sell, and they're not held in or constrained, then whatever path we take, I think is fair to people.
Wow, that's very interesting. So the domains we're talking about today include the winery, which is Jezreel. What is that domain?
JezreelWinery.com, JEZREEL winery.com.
Why is it not .wine? So why did you do Jezreel.wine?
because when we established the winery, the .wine domain didn't exist yet.
Ah, okay. So you have .com on that. Then you have Vincent.wine.
It's also, wine, got a little respect for tradition. .com was an important tradition.
No, I like that. I was just trying down the URL so that if people are interested, because you have the consumer product that people could taste right now, which is your wine. You have your collective experience in the wine industry, which gave birth to creating the Futures Marketplace. And then you have the hedge fund, which is, if you will, a derivative of the marketplace, because you got to see the opportunities early. And that sounds very interesting to me. And no, this is not a solicitation for investors. This is more of my own curiosity.
Yeah, definitely not. And, I think from a timing point of view, when, just as an example, again, this is just publicly available data. If you look at both 2008 and what we went through, or in the middle of, but would have been part of during the past 2 months, March and April, the classic equity markets have obviously dropped by, depending what day it is, dropped by big numbers, right? Right. So in 2008, the S&P 500 dropped by 38%. Yet if you looked at the wine market, it held its value. It didn't drop at all. If you look what happened in the wine market, if you look what happened, and in the end of December, I wrote a memo to my partners, Medici Ventures, and my other partners in Vincent, and I said it's time for us to bring back that idea of a fund that would sit next to Vincent, and here's why. And one of the reasons I wrote about it at the end of December was that wine holds its value even during times of financial crisis. At the end of December, I had no idea what was coming. Trust me, I had no idea. I do live, in the Holy Land, but I had no idea. I had no direct line or anything. I didn't know what was happening. But I said, this is what's happened in the past. This is what happened in 2008. This is what happened in 2001. And wine holds its value, and it's a great uncorrelated kind of defensive asset class. And then, sure enough, over the past 2 months, once again, wine has held its value while the markets have dropped by double digits.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Jacob. Jake, do you have questions?
I guess one question is, how soon is it before all the wine that we see at a store is able to be looked up and validated? Is your winery already putting QR codes on wine bottles, or what's the methodology for validating wine?
Okay, good question. So, how do you tokenize a physical asset? It's something that people have been talking about for the past couple of years already, at least, right? Whether it be in the art world or the wine world or other collectible markets. When you have a physical asset, how do I create the digital representation of this physical asset so that I can validate it from a digital point of view? So obviously, you could put a QR code on the bottle of wine, but then I could just take this QR code off this bottle of wine and put it on another bottle of wine. So that's an okay approach, but easily hackable. So you have to create other physical markings, which would be more difficult to replicate, and be more difficult than simply move a QR code from here to there. So we are moving down a path, a pretty well developed path already, where we create a physical tag, which is randomly generated and very difficult to, almost impossible. Nothing's ever impossible, but very difficult to replicate. And it becomes essentially a part of the seal of the bottle of wine, so that if you try and move it, you're going to ruin the physical tag. That physical tag is embedded in the blockchain and the record of this bottle of wine on the blockchain. Each bottle of wine is numbered, So when you scan it, there's going to be a QR code and this randomly generated physical marking. So when you scan it, you're going to get directly to that. From just your eye, you'll be able to tell with some degree of certainty is this the same thing. But then you could also scan it with your camera, and in the cloud will match it and say, yes, these things match. And so you're going to get a much higher degree of certainty than you have today for that this bottle of wine is what it purports to be. Nothing's ever going to be 100%, obviously. So, I'm sure there'll be, there are some bottles of wine that get sold for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. The record to date is $450,000 for a single bottle of wine. You can rest assured that will be hackers that will try to, that'll try and do it.
And do you think it'll be hard to get other wineries on with this technology? Because in order for it to be tracked across the board, everyone sort of has to be using either a similar technology or have their own way of tracking it.
Yeah, I think like with all of these things, you're going to have some things running in parallel until somebody like, Jeff Pulver calls us together and says, hey, guys, get your act together. Your platforms need to talk to each other in order for there to be value for all of you together. Hopefully, we will all agree, and we will be able to validate each other. But I think in the short term, you're going to have, and you already have, a few parallel efforts. And you're going to have a couple different apps on your phone, depending which bottle of wine it is.
That's awesome. All these projects are very, very interesting. Thank you for discussing them with us.
Thank you. Really, we appreciate your time.
Cheers.